The moment has arrived. The day of days is here. The final game in the group stage of the World Cup for the U.S. men's national team. The U.S. are set to take on Iran in 1 hour. A game which will determine the World Cup futures for both squads. For the U.S., it's simple. Win and you're through. That's all we got to worry about today. Now, Greg Berhalter's put out a lineup today. There's some surprises in this lineup. We're going to get into all of that and more on this episode of the Yank Report. What's up? This is Sam. This is your home for World Cup coverage. This is the Yank Report. Stick with us. If you are into that sort of thing, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Let's join Brad and start breaking down this lineup and what we expect to see today. On the other side of the break, here's a word from this week's sponsor. Football is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player news, and game trends. And as your continued source for all wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, we bring in producer Brad, who is literally pulling his hair out right now. We are an hour away from kickoff. It is the moment that we have all been waiting for. And Greg Berhalter has put out a lineup with a couple of surprises. So let's start there. Brad, you've seen the lineup. What are you thinking?
There it is. So I think it's interesting that he's going back to Sargent. Clearly not thinking that they're going to playing out in transition like he thought they were against England. So no Haji Wright. Cameron Carter-Vickers is probably the biggest surprise of all. That's really interesting considering how solid that backline has been. I think he's maybe looking for a little bit more distribution, which Walker Zimmerman has struggled with. So that's I'm okay with everything. I wonder how long you wait to bring on Brendan Aronson and Gio Reyna. I think in-game management is going to be very, very interesting today.
That's a big key. I think surprised about CCV because, we were talking about set piece possibilities, set piece targets. Walker Zimmerman is, of course, one of our big set piece targets. Tim Ream, not so much. And CCV, I don't know that he's a big aerial threat in set pieces as well. He's not one of the taller center backs out there. And I don't know if that's necessarily his game. So I'm a little surprised to see him in there.
I can only remember one CCV goal off corner, and that came from the ball bouncing around and it fell to his feet and he poked it in. It was, I think it was in the Old Firm last year. So he's not the biggest target on set pieces. Maybe you send Tim Ream forward and you leave Walker back a little bit. CCV back a little bit on set pieces, but anyway, it's definitely an interesting shout there.
Yeah, I see Felix Santos says, I don't think Zimmerman has been bad. CCV is 6 foot. It's a big surprise for me. It's a big surprise that Greg would make this change in this moment. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe CCV has a big moment in this game, and everybody will be so impressed by Greg Berhalter.
Greg is a genius.
Now, the other big surprise here is Josh Sargent starts up top.
Yep.
I think a lot of people were predicting Jesus Ferreira. I saw Fox did a little package on Jesus Ferreira right before this game whenever I was watching the coverage earlier. Vegas had Jesus Ferreira as the starter. So it seemed like the majority of people were thinking Jesus Ferreira was going to start, but Greg Berhalter says, no. We're going to go back to the starter from the first game against Wales. That was Josh Sargent. What does Josh Sargent bring to this team, and what can we expect with Josh Sargent in this lineup? What does this say about how Greg's expecting this game to go?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's even some reports were coming out that the only two changes were going to be CCV and Jesus Ferreira, but it turned out that the change was going to be Josh Sargent. I think he brings a physical aerial presence that we've seen a lot in the championship. Hopefully that comes good today. I don't know. I thought I would have liked a little bit more off the ball movement that Jesus brings, but then again, we've had really good success with the MMA midfield connecting the defense to the attack. So I think if we think we're going to be lumping balls up a lot, bringing in a lot of crosses, then Josh is probably the best person in the air for that.
Yeah, I think there were some different schools of thought on how this game would go. For my thought was that the U.S. would have the ball a lot and would be looking to play through the middle a lot more. Josh Sargent didn't give us much playing through the middle in the first game against Wales. So the thought would be bring in Ferreira for his ability to essentially play that false nine position and help combine and potentially create goals in front of the box. But the other school of thought was that Iran's defense is so compact and so good at denying those balls into the center anyway. Maybe that's just not even an option for the U.S. and we're going to see a lot more of the passing around, like that horseshoe shape possession style passing, where we would put a lot more balls into the box. And perhaps Jesus Ferreira is not the man for that job. If we're just going to be sending a lot of balls into the box, perhaps Josh Sargent is that guy. So I'm assuming that I think that's what Greg Berhalter sees and why he went with Josh Sargent in that position.
I think you go with Josh Sargent in that position, and I think that's also a reason why you keep Weston McKennie in the lineup, not even taking into account that he's had he's coming off a great performance against England. But if we are going to be having Jedi and Serginho bomb forward a lot and send a lot of crosses into the box, then we absolutely need that aerial presence, which you get with Josh Sargent and Weston McKennie.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us this morning in the chat. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already, so more people can see this and join us in this pregame show. An interesting question, the one that's sort of dominated the national team in every game so far is how will Gio Reyna be utilized in this game? We saw him for 10 minutes last game. That was a few days ago. Is he able to play 30 minutes in this game? Will Greg use him for 30 minutes in this game? We've seen throughout this World Cup that a lot of our attackers, once we hit that 55, 60-minute mark, are just don't quite have the same output that they did for the previous 45. Is this a game where we really see Gio Reyna come in and have an impact?
I think you have to. We talked about it last night. Someone in the comments said, what are you saving him for? You're saving him for this game. You're saving him for a game that you need to be have some attack, someone to bring off the bench to really kind of try and pick that lock. And if you are saving him for health reasons, this is the time where you really let him loose. And if he comes on, I mean, unless the U.S. is absolutely flying, I don't see how you can bring him on any later than the hour mark.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think there's a lot of interesting ways this game could go. Shout out, It's Called Soccer. Shout out, Jake. Let's go, boys, in the comment section. I think, we've seen two different tactical setups. I think from Greg Berhalter in the game against Wales and the game against England. In the game against Wales, we saw more of that classic 2-3-5 shape that we've been using throughout CONCACAF. In the game against England, we saw, I think it looked like more of a 3-2-5 with Serginho Dest kind of dropping back into that line of three and breaking down the press. I wonder how we see Serginho Dest being utilized. I wonder if we see some of what we saw the U.S. do against Saudi Arabia, where Weston McKennie sort of trickled into that front line and he became a way that the U.S. could break down that low block of Saudi Arabia playing direct to him. There's a lot of interesting ways that we can go about this. And so far, Greg has brought out different tactical wrinkles in each game. I don't know. Is there any tactical wrinkle in particular that you're expecting to see in this particular game?
It's interesting you bring up the game against Saudi Arabia because I think it could be a similar game. Lumping up those big balls to Weston McKennie and having him bring them down and then try and connect with Christian Pulisic, and they were connecting with Ricardo Pepi in that game, and now it's going to be Josh Sargent. I think that could be an interesting thought. Granted, I'm pretty sure Walker Zimmerman was starting in that game as well, and we have seen Walker play those long balls over the top very well. Granted, we've seen CCV do it in the Scottish Premiership and in the Champions League, so I'm not too worried about that. I definitely think this could be a big game for Weston McKennie. I think he could have a lot of big moments in this game.
I see Josh UFO says, will the U.S. try to hold possession, or are we going to hot them on the counter? Are we going to get them on the counter? I mean, I think all the experts coming into this game are suspecting the U.S. to have the majority of the ball and for Iran to kind of sit back. Now, there will likely be moments that Iran are pressing up high. and trying to put some pressure on the back line of the U.S. men's national team in possession. But I don't suspect that to happen throughout the game. I'm expecting the U.S. to have the ball the majority of the game and be looking like, as you said earlier, to pick those locks. Is that more or less how you're seeing it as well?
Yeah, I definitely I can see a lot of the horseshoe that we saw against Wales, trying to be calm, methodical, and break them down. But also, I don't know. I can see Iran pressing every now and again, because when they sat back against England, England just absolutely beat the brakes off them. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think the first 15 minutes, guys are really going to be feeling each other out. And if it's tied around the 20-minute mark, I think that's when you see the U.S. really put the pressure on and try to get at least one before half.
Brad, we got a comment for you here from Abul Fasi Mahamadi. Can you go ahead and respond to that one for me?
Go USA.
Yeah, I think that's what he said as well. Sorry, man. My Farsi is not very good. Yeah, I think one of the other things I'm seeing in the chat that's a really good point is Daniel Benson here says Iran scored twice versus Wales and twice versus England. If we don't score first, it could be a real problem. And that's the truth. Iran can hurt you in the attack. They've got two very good strikers. I haven't seen their lineup to know if both of them are playing or not. Maybe we can check on that.
I'm checking right
while
now.
we're going. Yeah, but Iran can definitely hurt you. They're definitely a team that, especially on the counter, Mehdi Taremi does not need too many opportunities to hurt you. He is a quality striker, as is Sardar Azmoun. So I think that, yeah, we have to be aware of the counter at all times. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we're seeing the MMA midfield start, and maybe explain CCV a little bit. I'm not sure, just to get some of that stability so that if Iran does hit us on the break, we'll be able to get back. However, we do expect the U.S. to have the majority of the ball. But I think it brings up an interesting point in that what happens if Iran does score first? Remember, the scenario for this is Iran only needs to get through with a tie. A tie gets them through to the next round of the World Cup. The U.S., on the other hand, needs that win. So if Iran does get a go-ahead goal, the U.S. has to then score twice. So assuming worst case scenario happens, how does the U.S. attempt to get back into this game? Is there a situation where Greg Berhalter does, break glass in case of emergency and does bring on Brendan Aronson and Gio Reyna, and we just have all of our attacking players go for it? Is there that scenario where all hell breaks loose and the U.S. absolutely needs a goal to or two goals to advance? Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I think we do have some attacking players on the back end that can do it. Do you have Iran's lineup for us?
I'm looking. Hang on. Got it. All right. Azmoun up top, and the 9, Taremi playing off his wing on the right wing. So yeah, those are two strong attackers up there that can absolutely hurt you in transition, and we've seen it happen. We saw them put 2 against England, and we saw them put 2 against Wales. Granted, those 2 against Wales came deep into stoppage time after a red card on their goalkeeper, and the 2 against England came late in the game, and one of which was a penalty. But still, that's nothing to take lightly. They still are very dangerous on the counterattack, so that's something you have to take seriously.
Now, in the other game against in Group B happening today, that's going to be taking place simultaneously. We've got England versus Wales. This game does have some impact on the U.S., particularly if the U.S. is able to win the game. If the U.S. is able to win and England loses, that means the U.S. will proceed as the top team out of Group B. If England ties and the U.S. wins, it will come down to goal differential. Now, England does have a major advantage in that because they did beat the brakes off of Iran in the first game. So the U.S. would have to also beat the brakes off of Iran, which would probably be a difficult thing for a squad in the U.S. that has just struggled to score goals. But this Wales England game is incredibly politically charged, much like this Iran USA game is. Those are two nations with a long history of not quite getting along. What do you see in that particular game?
I think Wales, I think one of the reasons they struggled against Iran so much was I kind of think they emptied the clip a little bit against the US, and I don't think Gareth Bale and Ramsey had those legs to go a full 90 minutes. And I think that might have been a little little foolish to leave him on there that long. That being said, it would make Wales is all but out unless they hang 4 or 5 on England and win. I think the Welsh would love nothing more than to spoil England's day and just make it a little bit harder for them. But that being said, Gareth Bale went 90. All their vets went 90 minutes against Iran and against the U.S. So I don't know if they can. I think they will get a moment of celebration. I do think they get a goal in this game, but I don't think that they have enough to beat this England team, who are very, very, very talented.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those moments where, Wales is a team that hasn't had a lot of opportunities to be in the World Cup. So having this opportunity to go up against your geographical rival in a game that just means the world probably to every Welsh citizen back home is going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. And I'm sure we'll be getting constant updates about that game during the US's game, because there are direct implications on that game. Now, I think back to the USA versus Iran, I think just this, I mean, where are we at on this Gio Reyna situation? We saw yesterday, around the time we were doing the show, Eric Winalda came out with a statement really walking back a lot of his comments that he made about Gio Reyna and conversations that he had with Claudio Reyna about a potential argument, and Greg Berhalter asking Gio to lie in a press conference and all of these things. So a lot of that has been walked back. We're still left in a situation where we were expecting to see a lot of Gio Reyna in this World Cup. We just haven't. It seems like as of right now that he's carrying an injury and is kind of slowly being worked back into form. But I'm curious, since we got the word that Winalda's kind of walking back his comments, where are we at now?
I think that Greg is really liking what he's seen out of Christian and Tim Weah. And how could you not? They were both very, very good in the first 2 games. So I don't think it's a strategy thing, but I do think, like I said before, I think if you're worried about Gio's health, then you give him that time to kind of get back to full fitness, get some rehab. And then this is the game where you throw everything, you throw caution to the wind and say, all right, Kit, you look him in the eye and say, are you good? And he says, yeah. Then you throw him on. And I think he might even come on at halftime. Latest I see him coming on is at the hour mark. Now, Eric Winalda, I mean, he walked back his comments. You and I were texting about this. It seemed like, I don't know, maybe he wasn't expecting things to get so crazy. But that just shows the growth of soccer in this country, is that, hey, dude, people are listening and people are talking about this, and people are going to freak out when there's any bit of news. So that's just, that's a sign of growth in this country, which is great. And hopefully it didn't infiltrate the camp that much. But hey, it's a sign of the game's growth in this country.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of U.S. national team fans that are very invested in the narrative that Greg Berhalter is having issues with a bunch of players. And I think any evidence that supports that narrative, people are really jumping on and running with, regardless of I mean, how factual that evidence is, or who it's coming from, or how many parties removed it's coming from, or kind of, it's, as long as it kind of supports that idea that Greg's not a good manager, people are willing to support that and blow that up in a big way. I think that's what we saw here. Dakota Young says, I believe there's a rift between the two, but they're just trying to save face, to be honest. And honestly, I got a lot of that from this whole ordeal. It seemed like a situation where, regardless of whether it was true or not, it was never a third party's place to reveal a conversation between father and son, particularly at a time like this, in a World Cup like this. Like, even if it's 100% true, you should, if you're the third party who's being confided in, you should not be saying these things in a public forum the way that it happened. So true or not, like, he definitely needed to walk that back and remove whatever rift might have happened to the team because of the distraction that it caused. Now, beyond that, we looked it up last night, and Claudio Reyna and Greg Berhalter literally played on the same high school soccer team. Like
Yeah.
these guys are from the same hometown. They grew up together. They have been long lifetime friends. Greg and Gio. I mean, Greg has known Gio since he was a toddler because of his relationship with Claudio. If we remember right, Claudio Reyna is, I think, the sporting director at Austin FC.
Yes.
Sebastian Berhalter, Greg Berhalter's son, had a loan stint at Austin FC. I mean, like these families are very intertwined, and there's a long
Absolutely.
history of the two. So the idea that suddenly there's like this rift between Gio and Berhalter and Claudio always seemed a bit far fetched from the start. Now that doesn't necessarily mean a rift can't happen, but what I do believe is happening right here is I do believe that Gio Reyna thinks that he's healthy. He's very frustrated. We've seen Gio Reyna on the field whenever he doesn't get a pass in a game, and the way that he kind of displays his emotion on the field and just gets frustrated. So I'm sure that he's very frustrated, and he's making it known that he's frustrated. Whether or not that amounts to like an actual drift or drama or whatever, or like actual upset feelings between the player and the coach, or between the player's dad and the coach, I think that that's a bit far fetched. I think that it's fairly normal, like sports dynamics is what's happening here.
And also, Sam, do you remember being 19?
Yeah.
Everything just meant so much more when you were 19. Everything was the end of the world. It's this kid has all the talent in the world, and we know he's a top player. And to have those injuries, not only in the back of his mind, but in the coaching staff's mind, they're trying to corral the emotions of a 19-year-old who has all the talent of the world and is playing at one of the biggest clubs and having success. And to be fair, Dortmund are really managing his minutes. They have been so smart and so tactical when they have played him. It's been 60 minutes here and then 30 minutes the next game. He starts and then he comes off the bench. So I think, he sees that. And yes, I think we all agree that unless Gio had a knock, it wasn't the right choice to bring in Jordan Morris over him. And yes, that would absolutely drive him bonkers. And then he's probably venting to his dad, which I would as well. My dad's, if my dad were a U.S. men's national team legend, my dad is a legend, by the way. But if my dad were a U.S. men's national team legend, I would absolutely be chewing his ear off. And it would probably, the game of telephone would begin between him and his friends and the people who were in the know. And I think that is how a lot of this just kind of spiraled out of control. But then again, it speaks to the state of soccer media in this country, that they're running with something like this. I mean, the last time we saw a firestorm like this in the media was when Landon Donovan was left off the roster, and you had a lot of clamoring for that. And that was an all-timer. This is a 19-year-old kid. I mean, that just proves how much people are paying attention. It gets me psyched.
Yeah, and I think if we're looking at the comment section right now, there's a lot of Iranians in here kind of speaking about the injustices going on in the country, talking about women life freedom, which is the chant that has been adopted in this protest. Felix Santos says a lot of Iranians in the chat. Welcome. Yeah, absolutely welcome. I mean, we're trying to keep this pregame show focused on the soccer. We did do a show last night where we talked a little bit more about the politics heading into this game. But I think the comment section, the chat, is evidence that, of course, this is not going to be a game that's just about soccer. I saw a comment yesterday that said like politics should be kept out of sport. And politics have never been kept out of sport. Politics have always been front and center whenever it comes to sport, really from the beginning of sports. This is especially whenever two nations come together, whenever two rival high schools from different sides of the tracks come together. The outside stuff is always on the table whenever those two teams meet competitively, and is absolutely so here. I think I've not met an American that does not support the Iranian people and their cause. We're terribly upset about the things that are happening in that country. However, I think in this moment, we're kind of focused on this game that's taking place on the field.
Amen. Yeah, it's the politics and sports conversation, it's never just shut up and dribble.
Yeah.
I think, coming from Northeast Ohio, where I'm from, I grew up a mile away from a statue of Jesse Owens, who
Yeah.
was a mainstay at the 1938 Olympics. And, it's something not far from my mind and my heart. And we support, rights for everybody everywhere.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing some of the responses to Tyler Adams' speech yesterday. Like I saw the vast majority of people were in strong support of it, but I did see some Americans that are like, he shouldn't be talking about politics. It's like it's a weird thing where sports and politics have just become so charged up in this country. But we can move on from that because we've got a game that's going to be taking place.
The only geopolitics we know about are the politics between Gio and Greg.
And we don't know much about those anyway. So
no, we don't.
I think one of the big discussion points coming into this game was about the MMA midfield and their ability to create against a low block. We haven't seen just a ton of created opportunities, but what we have seen is that the MMA midfield has given the U.S. men's national team in the first two games really control of the game, control of the space, control of where the game is played, how fast the game is played, denied counterattack opportunities to the opposition, and has really been a big reason why the U.S. has been able to get favorable results in the first two games. Coming in, a lot of people wanted to see maybe Brendan Aronson, maybe Gio Reyna start in these positions. What are your thoughts on the MMA midfield about their ability to create chances against this low block that we're likely about to see against Iran? Are you in support of MMA starting? Would you have liked to see somebody else in that group? How do you see the MMA midfield battle playing out?
It's interesting. The MMA midfield, I think, is great. They performed so well against England, but then again, England was trying to play pretty soccer, and I don't think we're going to see a lot of pretty soccer today. I think it's going to be a low block, a lot of transition play. So I think you try and play your game. You try and dance with the girl that brung you, and then if it's not working at halftime or the hour mark, you got to bring on Brendan Aronson and you got to bring on Gio Reyna, who are going to press, who are going to run and going to be very creative in trying to pick that lock that is the Iranian low block. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think I do think the MMA midfield is talented enough, and I think Weston was so creative and so good last game. You can't go with anything else to start the game. Now, if it's not working, you got to be you got to change it up, and that's on Greg. And hopefully he's learned from his mistakes in the last two games with substitutions. So we'll see what happens. I absolutely think you can't change it up right now in that midfield, especially going off. I mean, they put that England midfield in a stranglehold, and we did not give enough love to Yunus Musa in that midfield as well. He was just absolutely bossing dudes. So I think the MMA midfield is absolutely what you have to start with.
Now, I did a preview for the Iran game a few probably weeks ago at this point with Shayan, who's an Iranian American, and I asked him about a report that I saw on the Iranian midfield saying that this Iranian midfield was the worst midfield that's going to be at the World Cup. And as much of a homer as he is, he did say it might be accurate. It might be this midfield from Iran is not the strongest. We're not going to see the likes of the English midfield today. So we do expect that this midfield that has bossed everybody that they played are going to continue to do so. And as good as I see Aman Kumar says, I want Aronson. As good as Aronson has been for Leeds, and as good as we know that that Gio can be whenever he's on the field, I don't know how Greg can look at that man with the red, white, and blue highlights in his hair, Weston McKennie, and sit him down for this game. And likewise for Yunus Musa, who is becoming one of the more talked about players from this U.S. men's national team, something that I think we all saw coming following his performance against England. Weston McKennie was not great against Wales. He looked like he was laboring with an injury. After the second half, whenever he came back on, he couldn't even connect passes with people. So we didn't have high hopes for him coming in against England. Against England, he absolutely put on a Superman cape, and it really felt like whenever he made that run down the right flank, whenever he hit that pirouette and played in, eventually the ball found Pulisic, I think, or I don't remember exactly how it played out, but it really felt like that moment where Weston McKennie said, we're just as good as you, if not better, and we're going to show it. That moment really catapulted the U.S. into playing at a different level and really believing that they could break down the English side. It seems like the emotion that he brings to this team is just so damn important that I just don't see how you can sit him down. The question is, we saw a beleaguered Weston McKennie in the game against Wales. We saw incredible Weston McKennie in the game against England. What are we going to see in this game against Iran?
I think the game against Wales, I think he was laboring with an injury a little bit, and I don't know if they got him on that good Bayern Munich cocktail at the facility or something like that. But he was great against England. And here's my thought. Also, you have so many different personalities on this team. You have Christian, who's kind of a quiet, do your work kind of dude. You have Brendan Aronson, Tyler Adams, who is clearly your leader, clearly your captain. And then you got Weston, who's just an absolute wild card. I don't know if anybody in the chat or you, Sam, watched the Behind the Crest that they released last night, but he's climbing up ladders and trying to scare cameraman. He's a goof. So Weston, especially, the moment is never too big for Weston. Weston's just going out there and playing ball, which I think is absolutely an attribute to this team, because you need guys who are unflappable in that moment. And he's, I've seen him do it at Juventus. How long he's going to be there is a conversation for a different day with their board resigning and the transfer rumors. But I've seen him do it. I've seen him do incredible things. He walked into a training room at Juventus with one of the best players of all time in Cristiano Ronaldo. And he wasn't a fanboy. He didn't blink. I mean, this is a dude, I don't know if he's just weird or goofy, but the moment is never too big for him. And I think you need a guy like that out there in this moment.
Yeah, I think you can say the same thing about a few of these players. Like, I don't think that Tyler Adams is fazed by anything. And I think we saw evidence of that in that press conference yesterday. But I mean, there's been games where he's playing for Leeds, where he's playing against some of the top teams in the world, and he doesn't back down from anybody. And that attitude, you get that from Tyler Adams, you get that from Weston McKennie. I think you get that from Tim Weah a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these guys are absolutely fearless. I think Pulisic has just always been that way.
Yeah.
There's never been a moment where these guys have worried about the opposition and where they stack up. They don't worry about whether or not they belong. They absolutely believe that they belong, and I think we've seen that with this squad over and over again. Shout out to Hokey363, the new member. Thank you for joining up. Appreciate it. Appreciate you supporting the Yank Report. John Shuri says, why do you think they sat Zimmerman? It's something we kind of touched on earlier, but it is probably the biggest shock of the lineup selection in this particular game. Walker Zimmerman has been the rock for the U.S. all through World Cup qualifying and through the summer friendlies. Walker Zimmerman has just seemed like he didn't set a foot wrong since he started playing for the U.S. Way back, I think in the Gold Cup was whenever he really started in the Berhalter era, at least with this iteration. And here we are at the World Cup. He has the big mistake against Wales. He has a really poor game distributing the ball against England. And in the final game against Iran, he's pulled. Now, this is the Walker Zimmerman that played in really nice balls over the top that led to goals against Panama. He's the Walker Zimmerman that played that incredible ball over the top for Christian Pulisic to get the goal against Morocco, Brendan Aronson's goal. For the majority of World Cup qualifying, Walker Zimmerman has been that center back that we rely on for distribution. In these last two games of the World Cup, it hasn't been so. Tim Ream has come in and filled that role. And it's almost as if Walker Zimmerman with Tim Ream in the lineup has just forgot how to play center back. Where do you see the reason why Walker Zimmerman is pulled in favor of CCV in this game?
I think its distribution is the main thing. I don't think his defending, barring the massive blunder against Wales, has been too horrific. But I definitely think that CCV brings some distribution options. You saw against England that they were trying to force the ball to Walker to try and make him make a mistake.
Mhm.
And he did. He tried to force a ball to Tyler Adams, and it led to a counterattack that led to that last free
Yeah.
kick that Jack Grealish earned the foul from. So I think you're going for distribution here, and I think that definitely it leads to the thought that Greg thinks that, yep, right there, Iran's going to bunker. So they're trying to break them down. They're trying to play out of the back and get them to stretch a little bit more. So I think that's mainly the reasoning behind that substitution.
Now, you've watched CCV a lot more than I have. Do you think that he is superior to Walker Zimmerman in distribution?
In distribution, yes, but also CCV takes some more chances than, especially in defense, than Walker will. Walker is especially defensively is usually kind of a steady Eddie, pretty bland in what he does. CCV takes chances, and sometimes that's great. In the Scottish Premiership, he's done very well, but sometimes in the Champions League, we've seen him get toasted. He got toasted a few times against Real Madrid. Granted, Real Madrid is one of the best teams in the world, and at the club level, it's much different. But also against Shakhtar, the clip that went viral against them, where the guy had a completely open net and he fired one off the post. CCV was on the ground at the halfway line because he tried to make a tackle that led to that chance. So that is one thing that worries me, especially when you have Mehdi Taremi and his strike partner up top, who are very good. And I mean, Taremi's been scoring goals for fun at Porto. So I don't know if you really get the message to CCV, hey, don't take too many chances here, then okay, if that gets through. But I think his distribution is very good and similar to the level of Tim Ream.
Yeah, I see Dan Lieberman says, I think the GGG also wants the speed of Carter Vickers so the team can play more aggressively forward if Iran wants to bunker hard and hit fast on the counter. I mean, the pushback to that would be we just haven't seen Walker Zimmerman be beaten on the counter. That's just, I mean, he's run down plenty of players in the open field. I believe he ran down one against England. So I don't see that as an issue for his game. Maybe if that distribution is something. I mean, I think we've seen throughout the World Cup that Greg Berhalter hasn't exactly been transparent with the injury issues within the squad. So maybe that's something to explain why Walker Zimmerman's distribution has been so bad. We don't know. I'm just speculating, of course, because we don't have any hard information on that. So I don't know. I believe Dakota Young said earlier, this is a weird time to make a center back change, and I completely agree. This is a very weird time to make a center back change, but hopefully it plays out for the best for the U.S. I think we've talked about the midfield. We've talked about the defense a whole bunch. We haven't really talked about that front line. We touched on Josh Sargent a little bit. Tim Weah was the other one that, people have questioned whether Weah should be in the game over Aronson, whether Weah should be playing striker for this team, whether it should be Gio Reyna up there. Tim Weah has just been flat out one of the better performers for this U.S. men's national team in this World Cup and beyond. To me, he was one of the standout performers in World Cup qualifying as well. I think this team is just so much better whenever Weah is on the field. He brings so many things with his running, with his size, with his pace, his technical ability on the ball, and his creativity in the final third. I think are things that people sleep on a bit with Tim Weah. Tim Weah is a player for me that has struggled to find consistent playing time for Lille just because he's been in and out of the lineup with injuries. He just hasn't been able to put a consistent season together. So I feel like Tim Weah, if he was ever able to put together a stretch of games for Lille and have a full season, would be one of these players we were talking about for a big money move to a big knockout round Champions League team. It's just been the injury issues, as it has been for so many of these U.S. men's national team players over the course of his young career. But I think he's showing people in this World Cup that, I put out a tweet the other day. Every time I watch a game and there's a famous winger on the field, I think to myself, is this winger better than Tim Weah? And usually the answer is, I just don't think so. I mean, that guy is just so damn good. And I feel like we kind of put him in this category where he's not quite on the tier of, say, Tyler Adams, Christian Pulisic, Gio Reyna, and Wesley McKennie, but I feel like he absolutely is. Thoughts on going with Tim Weah in this game? Some of the other options that Greg could have gone with.
I love Tim Weah, and I absolutely think he has brought a lot to this team. I don't know how much, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum. His verticality really brings a lot to this team. I don't know how much that's going to be useful today,
That's a fair
especially
point.
against a low block. So I think one of the interesting options, and I think one of the changes he'll make if we're having trouble picking that lock, will be Tim Weah off for someone who's a lot more comfortable on the ball, making in runs 1v1 and navigating through traffic, which would be Gio Reyna. But I definitely think he's a guy who's feeling himself right now. And we've talked about this a lot. Maybe he's not completely 90 minutes fit, but I think you need to start him because I think he has that know-how. He has that attitude right now. And you don't, to quote The Hangover, you never leave when you're on a heater. I think Tim Weah is on a bit of a heater right now, and I definitely think he could try and unlock some things, especially in the early goings. But if it's not working, I definitely think you bring on Gio Reyna to try and break down that low block.
Yeah, I see Dakota Young here says, I can see Weah struggling in this game with the bunker. Fair point, Brad. Good. Put one on the board for Brad. Um,
Thanks,
I
guys.
wonder, though, because in this World Cup, we've seen so many teams just go against expectations of what the world thinks that they're going to do. I wonder if Iran comes out early and really pressures this U.S. for a goal because the U.S. has just expected Iran to sit back. Now, it's not exactly the soundest strategy because it does leave room in behind for the U.S. to counter. But I wonder if we'll see in that first 15 minutes or maybe at some point during the first half, Iran really going for it because, of course, if they get that go-ahead goal against the U.S., then they'll have a 2-goal cushion and they can kind of sit back for the rest of the game. So many people are just expecting Iran to just sit back and counter this entire game and just to park the bus. I wonder if there's going to be moments in this game where Iran is really coming at us.
Yeah, and Taylor Schwalman has said this a lot. You can't win this game in the first 15 minutes, but you sure as heck can lose it. Especially if you go down a goal early, you're going to have to really, they won't even come past the halfway line. They'll just anchor, bunker, bunker, bunker. So I think we may have to weather the storm a little bit. But that being said, you have two guys in CCV and Tim Ream who are good and solid in defense, but great in distribution as well. And we have guys who can hit people on the counter. And I think that's one of the reasons you start Tim Weah rather than bringing him off the bench is that the dude is speedy. The guy's got pace, so he can get out on the break and play a ball in to someone when the cavalry is coming down the hill. So we'll see what happens. I think the first 15 minutes of this game are going to be very interesting, and we might see some wrinkles that we didn't expect.
Yeah, I expect to see things that we don't expect. I think that's a good way of putting it because at this point, just the discourse around this game is that the U.S. is going to have the bulk of the ball, that Iran is more or less like the team playing against the Harlem Globetrotters in this game, and that the U.S. midfield is going to dictate it, and just Iran's going to sit back and just let the U.S. come at them over and over again. I don't know. Iran is a quality team. Let's not forget that they're a team that went out and beat Wales in a game that nobody expected. Clearly, I think some of the political things in their country played a little bit of a part in that game against England. I think emotions took part in that a bit. This is a quality side, and they can absolutely hurt the U.S. if they decide to come out that way. So I do wonder if we're going to see this passive Iran just the entire game as people are talking about. Now we're about 10 minutes out from the start of this game. So it is that time. It is time for everybody to give their predictions. Let me know in the chat how you see this game playing out. Let me know who gets those goals. Brad, we'll start with you, and then I'll give mine. How do you see this game playing out for the U.S.?
All right. I said it last night, and I'm not changing my opinion. I think it's 3-1 U.S. I think the U.S. get 2 goals in the first half, and then I think Iran makes some changes, and they get one early in the second half, and they're going to be pressing, and I think we're going to hit one late past the 80th minute to make it 3-1 and relieve some of that pressure. So That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I'm seeing a couple of people predicting Sargent to score a goal. It would be a big story if a striker finally came through for the U.S. There's a lot of different ways this game can go. I think a fascinating thing is if the U.S. are able to get that early lead, if they are somehow able to get a goal in the first 15 minutes, well, that switches the paradigm entirely because suddenly Iran have to come out against us and we're playing on the back foot and Iran are coming at us. And that gives us the opportunity to potentially get a few more. But it would completely shift the paradigm about how this game will go, which is fascinating. It's always interesting watching the Champions League games where goal differential is so important, and every goal kind of changes the paradigm completely, and teams start changing how they play back and forth based on who just scored the last goal. So it'll be an interesting thing. I do think the U.S. get an early goal. And I do think that causes Iran to come at us in a big way. So I'm like, let's see, what's this guy's name? Nev Bin here. Nev Bin here says 2-0 USA. I think It will be a 2-0 USA. I think Sargent finishes a Tim Weah square into the box. And I'll give one to a midfielder. Maybe Weston McKennie gets a goal based off of a move through the middle. That's my expectation. I think the U.S. get one early, and then Iran come at us, and that allows us to get a second one on a counter. Maybe I'll change, instead of Weston McKennie, let's say Brendan Aronson on a trailing run into the box for a 2-0 win. That's my thought.
I think there could be a USA penalty in this one.
That's true.
I think early, if Iran are bunkering, if we weather the storm for the first 10, 15 minutes, and then they start to bunker, I think there could be a penalty in this one that could open up the game.
Felix Santos says, I think a very nerve-wracking 2-1 U.S. win. Oh, man. Oh, I don't need that, guys. I don't know what happened in the last 5 hours of my life. I remember waking up, and then I remember sitting in this chair and starting the stream. I don't know anything else that happened. And I haven't been able to think about anything else. I for sure didn't go to work today. This is me working today. So we're 10 minutes out. So we're gonna get ready to head to the game. We're gonna check out the national anthems, which is one of my favorite parts about watching these games. We've given our final predictions. We said all there is to say. Nothing is left, but it's in the hands of the players now.
Al Davis, just win, baby. Just
win, baby. Just win, baby. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out. We will be here for post-game coverage in the exact same place. So
wear your blue.
Yeah, wear your blue. If you rode with us all the way here, make sure you ride with us after the game for the victory party, which is coming.
No bad vibes.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to all of my members. Shout out to the Tier 2 members. Thank you guys for subscribing, for liking, for sticking with us throughout the World Cup. My name is Sam for Brad, and this is the Yank Report brought to you by Bet